All right, we are back. We are back. We are back with El Famoso Profesor. He's joining us from the UK, from his new digs. If I'm not mistaken, he has just completed a move from the underground. How are you doing, Professor?
Good, good. It has been busy.
I
Has
can
been busy.
I can understand that. I can understand that. So, um,
Apologies
what
for
is?
the delay. I am 9 minutes late.
No, that's quite all right. Quite all right. We are catching up. This is the purpose of this particular episode. It's been a while since we touched base. I think you have been in Geneva since we have last talked. So maybe you can, in the first instance, just relay us what the mood is there. Is it existential dread? Is it an anxiety? Is it some sort of hope for the future? How is the industry reeling from this crisis? How is the industry affected by the crisis in financial markets?
Hmm. Right. I apologize for the background. It's my boxes. So I'm just barely in this new place. Um, and I've been traveling. You're right. So, what is the industry? What is the current um, thinking? Um, I think there is concern. there, there are two things the industry is concerned with. One is this huge disturbance that is happening in the world as a result of the strengthening of the dollar. This is really destabilizing the industry's pricing mechanism.
Mm.
And, the dollar has been gaining and gaining in strength over every other currency for the last several months. However, over the last 2 months, it has really gone berserk. Never have we seen parity, meaning 1 to 1 between the dollar and the euro. And now we are even below that. So you get with the same amount of dollars, more euros. Before you used to get less euros with the same amount of dollars. And besides the euro,
Mm.
the British pound, which I think I'm going to call it the Great Britain peso, has sunk even further. These are extremely important markets for the industry, the watch industry. And when the pricing of your watch is disturbed, um, you cannot really do much about it. Now, um, this is one, the currency, because watches are calculated on the basis of the currency. So if your market, is, let's say, China, the one has been weakening consistently over the last 1 year.
Mhm.
So you get more watch with the same amount of money, whereas before you got less watch, right, with the same
Yeah.
amount of money. I don't want to confuse people, but most understand what I mean. And Rolex tried to fix the problem very quickly by increasing the price of their watches. It has never been done before. In 1 year, they will institute two price increases. Never in the history of Rolex. Rolex usually increases the price of their watches every 2 years, usually at the beginning of the year. It is in January. This time
Mhm.
they have disturbed the waters and they instituted an increase at the beginning of the year, 5%, and then they did another 5% just in September. as the pound was getting weaker, they reckoned that a 5% increase would fix the problem. In fact, the pound against the dollar went down by another 10% in September. So,
That's right.
what is happening in the world of currencies is rather unique. We have never seen this before. The dollar pound rate is back to where it was in the early 1980s. What does
And
this mean? Let's say,
and
yeah,
and the thing is also, with this sort of fluctuation that happens in a relatively shortened period in a world where uh, now after COVID again in the post-pandemic environment, it has become easier for people to travel, relatively easier again for at least finished products, commodities to circulate. Of course, it creates an environment where people can basically take advantage of or even manipulate, of course, these pricing disparities, I should say, right?
oh, certainly. Um,
So it's
let's
it's one thing for something like this to happen in 1980s. It's another thing to happen in terms of the watch industry in 2022, where we live in a much smaller world in a way when it comes to the world of watches.
Of course. Let me give you an example. The price, I'll give an example from the British market. The price of a day date is, for all purposes, £30,000. Now it's 32, 33, depending on the model. Let's say it's £30,000. If you take that £30,000 before the decline of the pound against the dollar, you're flying from California. So you get on a plane, you fly economy, right? You pay for the ticket and you fly whatever, 14 hours, 12 hours to London. You arrive at the terminal and you go right in on Terminal 5 and you say, here's the money. Today, with the depreciation of the pound, you will probably be making 30% discount on that watch if you pay in dollars. On top of it, the UK announced the VAT rebate is
Mhm.
going to be reinstated, meaning that for a foreigner like yourself, Lord, if you come to the UK, you can buy the product, not pay VAT, and get a rebate of that at the airport. So you will get another 12, 13%
Mhm.
discount. So you get on the currency and you get on the VAT rebate. So you're actually buying the watch in the UK cheaper by 30% than if you were to buy it in California. So imagine what will happen to the world if everybody hops on a plane and starts flying around trying to get these deals. Now, the only thing that can save Rolex, because this is going to create huge disturbances for the supply chain, for the market, let's say in California, if people start hopping on planes, the only thing that is saving a company like Rolex and others is Patek, for instance, that you cannot get the watch that you want. You know, you need to be on that list and you need to be a customer. So you won't really get it in a way. But if you were on the list and you got the call, you can easily make 30% on that watch. Now, on top of it, you hold on to that watch, you buy it today, right? You make, let's say, 20% on that watch just because of the currency. Forget the VAT,
Mhm.
okay? 20% or so, because the pound has appreciated over the last few days, right? So let's say 20%. You keep that watch for a year or two or three, the pound will appreciate against the dollar. So you're going to make another 20% eventually on the watch based on the currency appreciation eventually of the pound. So you're making, easily 30, 40% just because of this movement of currencies. And the industry hates that. The industry hates that because it creates an arbitrage. If you calculate, for instance, Rolex prices at retail between a country and another, the difference is very small. The difference is, 300, 400 euros or or dollars from here to there. Rolex has always made sure to close the gap, so people like, the California guy is not going to hop on a plane to Mexico and buy the watch and then come back and sell it and make money from the difference, from the arbitrage. So that is really what is currently um, disturbing the market and is creating a huge concern for the big manufacturers. Patek has the same problem because Patek is selling fewer watches but at a higher ticket price, and that's a problem. And so Rolex is trying to get around it, but I don't know how they're going to do it. The second problem the industry is facing is something that you and I have been talking for some time, and
And also,
I
just
think,
just one sentence, if I may add to that first point, is
please.
is of course, at the end of the day, Rolex is setting the suggested prices at the end of the day, and it only really controls its own relationship with their authorized dealers, right? It has no direct control over the secondary markets at all. So, there are so many layers of complexity in a time of uncertainty when it comes to the strategy of even the most established brands, and compared to a lot of these other brands, and even brands owned by luxury groups, I'm sure Rolex and Patek are certainly going to survive this crisis. The question is always how.
Yeah, of course. No, they will. They've seen crisis before. Uh, how many times? The second is actually the crisis. Something that you and I have discussed for many times, and probably some of your viewers jokingly might have said, how can this be serious? But we have talked about the crisis, the looming economic crisis globally. I think that is a concern, a serious concern, for the watch industry. How deep will it be? How long will it be? And how is the recovery going to be? It seems that Europe is in the middle of a great recession. Um, I don't know how to describe it, but they're at the beginning of what seems to be a huge energy crisis. We're just entering
Yeah.
um, the winter, and they're beginning to talk about ratios, rationing energy and cutting down electricity. I was in Germany 3 weeks ago, and I've noticed um, public streets have limited lighting. Public places have no lighting at times. Um, you go to, I don't go, but others go to swimming pools, public swimming pools, and there is no heating. Public places have showers, believe it or not, have cold water. Things are happening, and
And Professor, you're sure you didn't travel back in time to Weimar Republic or anything, right? You went to the current Federal Republic of Germany.
yes, no, I did, um, and this is the beginnings of what we're going to see in the winter. So I'm not so sure the Europeans are going to have an easy time on this one, on the global recession.
No, I
And
mean,
that,
look, we are once every so often. Earlier too, we crack jokes about this because what else is there to do, right? We do want to keep a sense of humor, but the winter hasn't even set in, and because of the current dependence of especially Central Europe on Russian natural gas, it's not going to be easy at all, and it's going to affect, of course, gas prices, which will reflect on electric prices and electric shortages, and that will affect, of course, everything else in terms of pricing. um, so the bottom has probably already fallen out, but if it hasn't, it will fall out in the winter, and in the watch market it's already started to reflect. I'm not gonna really show our cards because it was a private conversation, but we were just talking about two models that were really hot just a few months ago. And by hot, I mean twice or more than twice the retail price they were going in on the secondary market. Now, basically, I saw two of them. One was not the one you asked for. The other one was another color, iconic color. It was like 11 and a half, I think, box and papers and fully stickered. And it's crazy. And I know I have a very special relationship with this person, so he won't give that price to anyone who walked in from the street. Still, right? I'm also not a dealer myself. I'm also not part of that close circle of colleagues for this particular dealer either. But I'm a friend. But even the friends, there's a limit to what you can offer, right? No one just because their friendship is going to give you 5711 at retail, for example, right? So that being said, certain hype models have been in free fall for the last few months. Of course, the Daytonas, Nautiluses, and Roy Lokes of this world will probably survive the crash with 20, 25, 30% perhaps. But certain models that have had this temporary jump have more than corrected in the last few months, and again they keep falling in terms of the prices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the secondary market, things will really settle, and we're not yet there. I think that we're at the beginning of this, and as I was saying, that Europe is entering a recession. The Middle East is not necessarily entering a recession. I mean, they're still in la la land with oil at $85 and $87 a barrel. But just 2 months ago, it was $120 and $130 a barrel. So things are correcting all over. China is in a deep recession. It is in a deep recession. The market there, if you look at the indices on consumption, demand, basic consumer goods, even luxury items, it's falling very fast month after month. And you look at the different festivals
I
that they
think
have. Yeah.
I think that I don't want to go fully behavioral economics on this one, but sometimes we also look at numbers and neglect the psychological effect of these crises. You always bring up that point, in fact, when how people start behaving in a period of austerity. But this is the kind of news we are reading both in the context of the US and China, which are two of the world's biggest economies. We hear about people quitting their jobs. We hear about people refusing to work from the desk at an office anymore. We have people quitting silently, showing modes of passive resistance at work, doing the minimal amount possible to get by. Among youth in China, for example, apparently that's the trend now, because people are simply devastated psychologically. They have lost their belief in the economic system. They don't believe that the system is working for them anymore, that the system is benefiting them anymore. And that kind of loss of confidence, I think, in the markets is much more severe than any number that we can observe in terms of rates of recession or inflation. It's about how it affects people's working and spending habits that's much more severe, I think.
I agree. And when we look at, for instance, the US hasn't yet had these instances of a recession, but they will slowly get into that because nobody is isolated. So things will correct. I mean, by the winter, the middle of the winter, probably the watches that you and I have discussed will be priced lower. I think
Possibly.
I think they will be priced lower. Yeah, and I think there will be more supply because people will, some will say no, I'll hold on to it until we recover. Some people will say no, I need the money, and some of them will say, okay, I really need the money.
Right.
And there will be more supply in the secondary market. In the primary market, which is the retail, I think these lists that companies have created are going to be very, very different. And I'll give an example. I was in another trip in Italy
Hmm.
back in April, and with a friend of mine, I went to a shop, um, and he requested, but I did the talking and he did the watching. So um, he requested a special watch. So I went to the lady and I said, "Hi, I'm Doctor whatever." You know, very arrogant people. You can guess the brand. I'm being a bit cryptic so that I can create a little bit of thought around. They said no. We waited in line. It was raining. It was ridiculous. I said to him, is this what you want to do? You want to queue to go and see a watch? I mean, this is ridiculous. What are we doing here?
And
This was at the height.
you're not even going to see the watch. That's the
We're not going to see
funny
the
part.
watch exactly. So we were queuing, and next to me was a British guy, young fellow, 25, 26 years old, and he was asking me, "What watch are you interested in?" I said, well, "What is going on here?" He said, "Oh, I'm here to I want to get this watch." It was like we were queuing up to get cocaine or something. So anyway, the majesties of the shop opened the doors, and we went in after half an hour of waiting. I mean, ridiculous stuff. So I went in, and I see a sales lady. She was a nice lady. And funny enough, she came from a country where I know her language. Well, I can give it away. She was from Morocco. So I said to her, "Oh, okay, you speak Arabic. I speak Arabic. Okay, great." Anyway, I think I broke the ice, and we had a conversation. And I said, "Listen, in Arabic, my friend here is shy, but he really wants this watch. Can you put him on a list? Forget the watch. I mean, we're never going to get it. I know." And lo and behold, she said, "Okay, let me check with my manager." So she goes up, and then she says, and then the guy comes up and says, "Oh, hello, Dr. John. Yes, welcome. Um, yes, it's a great honor to have you here." All right. Anyway, lo and behold, she gives us a call 4 weeks ago. She gives me a call and says, "The watch is here." Oh,
Okay.
I go, okay. I call my friend. I say, "Really, you need to fly to Italy to get it because, of course, it's not my watch and I cannot get it. Plus, it's very expensive. I don't have this kind of money. You know, it's
Understandable.
ridiculous." And so I spoke to her just to finish the question, the story, and I asked her. I said, "Hey, listen, how come you got this watch? I mean, this is like the watch of all times, right?" She said, "Professor John, do you know what is happening to the world?" I go, "Yes." Well, 6 months ago, this watch was the watch to kill for. Today, we're looking for people to buy it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we don't necessarily always want to give the names of the brands away, but I'll tell you this now. Of course, there is the so-called holy trinity of watch brands. There is the holy trinity of hype watches. And there are other watches that the hype around those watches have pulled up. So, you know, the fact that Patek Philippe Nautilus first became scarce, then unobtainable, and then finally discontinued in its most popular iteration, led people to look for other stainless steel integrated bracelets, luxury sports chic watches. That pulled up some other brands, and they followed certain trends. Brands that didn't even have a sports watch in the luxury high horology category invented them, made up, and came up with sports watches. Now, some of these brands are realizing that the hype those watches have generated for the brand is both a blessing and a curse, right? And soon they might realize that even if the hype around a certain model is sustainable, that situation might not be sustainable for the entire brand, right? And I have in mind a couple of brands like Vacheron Constantin, like A. Lange & Söhne, which have benefited from very specific hype and excitement around one particular model of watch, which opened then the eyes of a certain segment of the customer to how much value and what level of workmanship that these two brands already presented, right, in comparison to their peers, which are, Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, so on and so forth. But soon enough, right? And we are still living in the hype. I was just in Southern California in a major watch event, and the Lange boutique was just as crowded, if not more, than the Omega boutique. I mean, people love this brand right now. Not that there are ever enough watches that can respond to the interest. But there is that genuine excitement now. But is that sustainable at that price point, at that limited availability? It's impossible. The watches for Vacheron Constantin that were unavailable just a year ago are becoming available at retail from their boutiques. It's a very interesting, and at times to the end customer, a very confusing environment. So I hope we can come out from this discussion with a couple of bullet points, one of which was about lasting value, which I shared in terms of our conversation, the conversation I had with Eric Wind on this channel a few weeks ago already. Because Fries with Mayo signed in from Brussels, and he's looking at two iconic watches that present that sort of lasting value. The 5513 Rolex Submariner from 1967, and 67 Moonwatch with that famed caliber 321 on the nightstand. What else? Great collection there. He has a much more extensive collection, but hey, you could have just these two watches and live and die as a happy man if you're a watch enthusiast. Fry says again, gas prices at 1.6 per liter yesterday, 2 per liter back in June. So there's bad stuff, but also states intervening with reserves or sales, tax cuts on energy when energy itself spikes. Meatball says AP aftermarket has taken the biggest hit downwards. Most certainly. I have, at any point in time, I have we complained about this in the past, about pricing on the usual suspects like Chrono 24. But at any point in time, I have dozens of watches on my watch list, on my notepad, so to speak. And every morning I get 3 or 4 so-called price alarms. 5% off, 10% off, 20% off. Some things are fire sale, others are 30-40% off than where they were at their peak, sometime in March or even April. It's a different world. Fry says he is from Belgium, a Belgian citizen, French resident, works in Switzerland. And he agrees fries with mayo is the only way to eat Belgian fries. So we talked about the difficulties that the big four are experiencing with pricing. We have in the past talked about how, as much as they seem to play either mum, or as much as they denigrate rhetorically the secondary market or gray market of watches, we have also mentioned that a lot of these big brands actually are taking pleasure in their watches being traded at these levels. They recognize the roundabout benefit that they gain from the perception that watches are good investment.
Yes, absolutely.
So now that false perception seems to be shattered, if not completely, certainly quite miserably, how are the brands reacting?
I mean, they are defensive by saying that, look, it's just a hiccup in the global economy. Things will recover. Things will go back. The issue, of course, the question for everybody is when do they go back? To what level do they go back? Yes, stocks go back, but the issue is the time. Some of the stocks could take 10 to 15 years to go back. You look at, for instance, a stock like Peloton, which was the darling of stocks during the pandemic. And it went all the way to $175. Today it's trading at $7. Yes, it will go to maybe 50 and 100. It might take 2 decades. So it really depends. Now, when will watches go back? I think the whole theme about the investment story is out of the window now. It will come back when the money supply comes back, when interest rates decline. But that right now seems to be a 10-year possibility. We're 10 years away from going back maybe to a lower interest rate environment. Most likely we will stay pretty high for the next 10 years. So, you can hold on to your watch. I don't think it's going to go back to the 5711 or the Daytona anytime soon to $200,000 in the secondary market. And it could go further down. Because remember what we keep on saying, and I'm a good example of that. When there is a decline in prices, people apply a very simple principle, which is called the principle of the economics of thrift. So in anticipation of lower prices, you postpone the decision to buy and you wait for the next 3-4 months. It's exactly, what I said. Oh, Lord, this watch that I want, maybe in 3-4 months it will go down. And people will do the same thing in homes, in big asset prices that have a big ticket, right? Especially the housing sector. Housing sector in the US is going to decline. People are not going to buy homes, not because it's expensive. Yeah,
it's already miserable. It's already quite miserable. Yeah, people are really having a hard time selling anything in real estate. People who rent are are having a field day because, I mean, people who have property and rent it out, I should say, because homes are less and less available. If they are available, people postpone a decision like that to months and even years down the line. So everyone wants to rent, and the rent market in places like Los Angeles is just skyrocketing.
Not only, yes, exactly, not only that, but there is, just to say something about currencies, um, and the global economy. I don't want to be just a one-side economist here telling you that everything is collapsing and there is no faith and future, and things are going to go bad all over forever. Look, I have been around a few recessions. Just because of my age, I'm a little bit older than you, Lord. So I've seen the 2008, 2009 recession. I was working for Wall Street and I've seen it. Um, we recovered from that. That was pretty bad. The great financial crisis. We had another one in the early 2000s. I was in that one as well. Not working for the dot-com world, but I was in the world of finance.
Mhm.
So we do tend to recover, right? But it takes time. Currencies are collapsing, but the dollar is going to weaken again. Not now, but it will weaken. And now we're in the middle of, this great storm, and we're just saying, okay, it's going to collapse. I think things look bad. Things eventually will recover. I don't know how the recovery will look like. It could be that we recover globally through the green recovery, but the green recovery, I'm sorry to say, has a lot of carbon in it, and it's not that green. I think the recovery is going to be quite dirty, and this is something that I'm very passionate about because I'm researching it. And unfortunately, Tesla is not a green car for those who are driving a Tesla. And but we just need to think of how we're going to replace our energy demand, and the supply of that energy from something else, and that will take time. So yes, things are looking bad and will continue to look bad, but at some point they will recover. Stock prices could go another 10-15% down. Eventually, over time, they will recover, but we don't know when this recovery takes place and how long it takes to recover.
Right. I mean, you can ask the Japanese, right? It took them 2 decades to recover from their big crisis. So you never know. It might be just a few years. It might be a decade. It might be longer. Um, but I don't think, like you implied earlier, at the very beginning of our conversation tonight, I don't think we have seen the worst of this one just yet. I think the winter seems to be particularly ominous for me, at least, according to my understanding.
Absolutely. And also we have to, because this is an industry producing luxury goods. Depending who you ask, they could very well say, "Oh, I still have my clients, and these special clients are always in demand of watches, and these watches are, investments and all of that." Yes, of course. If you're talking about a clientele that is buying a watch for 50 and 80 and $100,000, these guys will always have the money, right? But many of these brands are, their core market is the upper middle class, and that upper middle class is getting income disturbed. It's becoming more difficult, and for the brands like Omega and the mid segment, it's going to be more difficult.
Right.
Don't go far. Just look at, for instance, the demand for Apple products in the US. It's beginning to go down.
For
It
the
is not on
for,
the way up.
for the first time in a long time, Apple has seen a dip in terms of their sales. But yeah, before we go to that, I mean, my thinking about that is, of course, it's fine for the most elite, the most luxurious brands who really operate at a very different price segment and who appeal for the most part to genuinely the 1% in the most specific and simple definition of the term. Things might be fine and they might easily weather the storm. But I'm sure a lot of people in the industry understand that watchmaking is an ecosystem, right? At the end of the day, if you want to have a Swiss watch industry or mostly European watch industry, and you want to sustain that on the continent, it's you have to be much more careful than that. You have to have much more of a long-term planning than just counting on a few select clients with bottomless pits of money, right? You cannot, like you said, you have to appeal to the middle class, to the upper middle class, insofar as these people even exist anymore, right? Much less as buyers of luxury watches. OG Hash Hockey says, Professor, great to have you. I think there's one additional point to add to your case. The monetary supply is infinite, but there's a major battle between credit versus liquidity.
Yeah, let me say something about that. The monetary supply can be infinite, but it is not. The balance sheet of the Federal Reserve in the US is, uh, over the years, has become so humongous that at some point it will create inflation, regardless of what is happening to the world. The age of quantitative easing has come to an end. We cannot fight this crisis by just pumping more money. We did it in 2008, 2009 to get out of the subprime crisis and help the banks and recover. Now, that is not feasible. It requires something else other than the quantitative easing issue. And the other thing is that we cannot supply more money because now we are fighting inflation. And the only way to fight inflation is to contain liquidity. And everything is priced upwards. If you price upwards everything, demand declines. This is quite obvious. So demand declines because you need to contain inflation. Inflation, in the Eurozone is like 10% and growing, which is unheard of. We're not yet, in the middle of a World War II scenario, but it's beginning to look like that. And just gasoline prices is not going to help. I think you guys in the US are more insulated because you're independent for your energy needs. The Europeans and the rest of the world, but more so the Europeans, do feel it. And as I said, the Chinese, on the opposite spectrum, they just have a great recession. Real estate is collapsing, has collapsed. Banks are barely making it. Consumption is not there. People are losing their jobs. Of course, a lot of the data points are not coming out because everybody's in jail in China. We don't even know if their leader was put in jail, he's under house arrest, or there was a coup. I mean, there is a lot of lack of data on China right now. We don't even know if they're going to have a war with the Taiwanese and go and invade Taiwan. I mean, if that happens, um, uh, we can have, huge disturbances in the global economic system. So unfortunately, central banks do not know what they're doing right now. There is huge amounts of illiteracy when it comes to fighting this. And the Europeans look completely wacko and unable to fix anything. Unfortunately, Powell and Yellen, Powell will get the hit on the US for its recession. And I think the Chinese have to address their issues, but I don't think they're addressable. So in the middle of all this, the watch industry is trying to make sense of, where are we going? Yeah, voodoo economics.
And I think we'll have a future episode, hopefully maybe in a week, if you have time, where we discuss how the industry, in what specific ways can some of these biggest watchmakers respond to a crisis of this sort. Maybe taking an example of how they responded to earlier crises. You were just talking about 2008. We can talk about the Asian crisis earlier. We will have much more ideas to generate in terms of how some of the big brands, at least, can respond in terms of changing the ways perhaps they distribute their watches, in terms of taking charge of perhaps their own supply and pricing in a more immediate manner, and even about how they can use their own past, their own heritage, when they are creating new models, when they are generating new ideas, because I think that also has a certain cycle of innovation and tradition as it relates to the state of the financial markets. I mean, every time the market seems to be going down and the hype is dying around these sorts of futuristic, innovative watches, a lot of brands seem to go back to their bread and butter, more classical designs, simple executions of their aesthetics, right? It doesn't always have to be the simplest three-hander watch, but rest assured that Patek will try to go to simpler perpetual calendar chronograph watches, hand-wound chronographs, and try to produce exciting models of that. Rolex has perfected this particular approach to design, always being minimalist, always working for evolution over revolution, tradition over innovation, little cosmetic updates here and there, a little bit of a technical innovation in this model rather than that. But ultimately, I think that model stands the test of time, right? Where a lot of these brands start taking less risks in terms of how they shape the future of their own brand and own image in a time of economic uncertainty.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Also the watch industry will tell you that we're looking over the long haul. So this is just a noise. 1, 2, 3 years. We've seen it before. We've been around for 200 years, or 100 years, or 300 years, and we've seen it before. And it's okay. It's the nature of the cycle. It's up and down. Business cycle. You look at basic business cycle behavior. Every 7 to 9 years, there is a recession. It has been quite unique that we haven't had a recession over the last 12 years. It has been the longest rally in stocks in the US that we have seen over the last 70 years. So it's bound to happen. People were becoming frisky and happy and all of that, for too long.
And look again, especially some of the bigger houses, you know, like Patek, like Audemars Piguet, like Vacheron Constantin, like Rolex, like a lot of these brands that are now backed by luxury conglomerates, which seem to have just again a bottomless pit of capital behind them. Like the number of LVMH, Richemont, and Kering storefronts that you have in Rodeo Drive, I don't know who can pay that kind of rent. Like there's no way in whatever level of purchasing power and liveliness to the market, there's no way where they can actually stay out of red with the rents they would be paying in Rodeo Drive, but they can somehow because the resources are seemingly unlimited. This is all fine, you know. Again, when it comes to the 24 brands that are held in this way or that have weathered every imaginable storm, we can imagine, hey, they have survived the quartz crisis and the mechanical watch is still alive and well after, you know, half a decade, half a century after the climax of the quartz crisis. So it will be alive and well, chances are, in another 50 years and maybe 100 years or maybe longer. But in what shape and form? No, nothing is guaranteed. I mean, anyone who knows the world of vintage watches, anyone who loves certain kinds of vintage watches with passion can count at least half a dozen brands that were once mentioned in the same sentence with these, you know, dignified big six that we count. And where are they now? Right? So things do disappear. I mean, Universal Genève, right? What happened to them? They were at one point in time, up until late 60s, early 70s, they were one of the biggest producers of chronographs in the entire world. And not only for themselves, right? For many other brands as well. Where are they now? So nothing is guaranteed, right? The industry itself will survive, but the players will change. And, you know, at the end of the day, they need to be really much more careful rather than resting on their laurels. Fries with Mayo says, upvote. Thank you, my friend. Please hit the like button. It doesn't cost anything, but means a lot for me. Jay Gray says, pump and dump. OG hash hockey. He was earlier saying it's just the cost of capitalism. Remember, the majority of the gray market does not source from the ADs. This is actually wrong information, OG hash hockey. They do source from the ADs, usually from another country, but they have backdoor deals with authorized dealers. That's how they get their watches, not from Christopher or Michael or Josh, who shops for watches and tries to flip or tries to move on from one piece. The bulk of their watches, the gray market dealers, get from authorized dealers with whom they have sometimes decades-long backdoor deal relationships. They raise a large stake and battle for product directly with manufacturers, excluding Rolex. Yeah, they can have that too, I'm sure. But certainly it's not from Dick and Joe that they're getting their watches, that's for sure. And look, it exists in any luxury industry, right? Some luxury products travel through quote unquote authorized dealers, right? Big stores and sometimes even small time online sellers buy stock from these brands directly. And when they can't sell, those products go to jobbers, right? In bulk for like 10% of the actual value. And then you see the same product on eBay. So the gray market's in the same way, right? If brands have uh, like at the last Asian crisis, right? When the Chinese government cracked down on the industry of luxury watches because they were too easily and too openly given out as bribes. You know what happened? A lot of those watches that were produced with the Asian market in mind, with the Chinese market in mind specifically, couldn't be sold in the Chinese market through the official channels, and they turned up in Europe, they turned up in the US through the gray market. So you are absolutely right. Yes, they do sell, especially if they have overstock, for sure. They do sell in bulk to so-called gray market dealers. You're absolutely right. Meatball says, I purchased my smiley face from Austria through Germany from a Rolex dealer in Mykonos, Greece, fully stickered. What smiley face? What is a smiley face? I sometimes completely feel out of sync with these nicknames that people come up with for watches. So I don't know. OG Hashhockey says Audemars Piguet and Patek Philippe sell huge parcels of their watches directly to gray market dealers. I wouldn't be surprised, although I would have to say allegedly, so we don't get ourselves in trouble. Oh, the smiley face Black Bay. Okay. Yeah. The one that says rotor self winding, right? At 6 o'clock. Yeah. What do you think about this, El Professor? How do you think these gray market dealers get their watches?
No, I think there is collusion between the authorized dealers at some point. And that's why, for instance, Rolex in many instances took them out of the last year. There was a lot of complaining, a lot. By a lot, there are about 1,800 of them around the world. So by a lot could be 20, 30. But they will tell you there are rotten apples all over the place. So it's normal what is happening. I think, yes, of course, there is complicity between authorized dealers who would get the 5711, but there is also complicity, collusiveness by authorized dealers on another level. When they tell you your first watch cannot be this one, it has to be this one after you buy all the garbage, all the rubbish that you don't like, you need to buy it. It's the same collusiveness, um, but there is connectivity between ads and gray marketeers. It's not these gray marketeers did not get access from people who would go to them saying, here's the watch, I just bought it, why don't you buy it from me? This is garbage, because there is no way an ordinary person would know how to get to that gray market dealer. So I think it was systematic. It was done by people who would go and connect with authorized dealers. Not all of them would do it, but many of them would. And the connectivity between ads and gray market players was there, whether we like to admit or not. I think it was there, and the industry cannot do anything. It actually liked it, that because it brought their watch up to a new pedestal. If the
Right.
gray market price was up by 3, 4, 5, 10 times,
Look, I
it
have to
made their
say,
product, because then, just let me finish on this. It made all the other shit products that they produced very much sought after. You would go for a Submariner steel and they will tell you 4 years. So, but they will tell you, we have this two-tone. Why don't you get this shit two-tone or the all gold model? So you would go and say, oh, yes, of course, I don't have an alternative. So Rolex and everybody else benefited from that. They will tell you, you want the 5711 or the 12 or the 5990 or whatever, the Aquanaut. Well, you cannot get it, but you can go and get the Calatrava.
Yeah.
I don't like the new Calatrava. I like the old Calatrava. Well, you can get the world timer. You will pay $35,000-$40,000, and then they hype you by prepping you up. So you spend $200,000-$300,000 on shit products, right? And then they'll tell you you can wait for maybe a gold 5712. You're not going to get the 5712 steel, or there's no way you will get the 5711, because that will go to the Chinese guy who has already spent in one day $1 million. By the way, I've seen this
Of course.
happening. I've seen this
Um,
happening.
Look, by the way, just to put it in another perspective, the two of us, we complain a lot about that sort of not only that sort of spending, but the whole outlook that treats watches simply as investment or as just a mindless luxury product. On the other hand, we have to understand now, with that perception of watches as investment grade commodities, and this idea that you can actually buy watches and look smart thanks to that. There's a new perception of the watch collector that's no longer dorky and nerdy. I mean, just 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we would be categorized either with stamp collectors or collectors of first edition books. Nowadays, being a watch collector became something cool. So there is unintended, perhaps, secondary, perhaps, corollary, perhaps, but there is a general positive effect. There is a kind of sheen that this hype gave to the hobby. Now, I have never had a problem with being considered a nerd, right? That never fazed me. But there is something there's something to be said about the prestige watch collecting has gained in the last 10, 15 years in the 21st century, let's say. There's certainly a more positive perception of a watch collector in the mainstream.
Well, what I can say is, in general, that buy the watch because it makes you happy and you like it. My wife told me something very important. She said to me, "You sit here, with your watches, thinking, oh, is this good? Is this bad? Are you going to ever sell your watches?" I said, "No." So why do you care what is the price later on and whatever? You're never going to sell. You're buying it for yourself. Go and buy anything you want. It doesn't really matter. It's all about your inner peace and being. Um, this is all I wanted to say. The recent hypeness about the investment stuff is just as a result of this cryptomania, stock market frenzy that was taking place for 2 years. We were being locked up, and suddenly everybody discovered watches. Um, I think that this era has come to an end, and there is a new era. Watches will always be important. They will recover. I don't think we're going to go back to the frenziness. Some models will do very well, others will not do well, but buy watches because you like them. Fundamentally, you enjoy them. I mean, for instance, my eyesight has gone bad over the years. So even if I'm wearing a beautiful watch, I can't really see it very well. you know. So I need,
It's
I'm
all
just being
about the feeling, Professor. As long as you know what you just strapped on your wrist, who cares if you
exactly.
can actually read the time or read any of the functions on the
Actually, I don't see it anymore. I don't look at the watch anymore, but I just like to feel it. Recently, because of I turned 50. Well, I'm 51 now. Um, I am thinking maybe, for a very long time I was making fun of all these guys who were wearing gold watches. Recently, I was, as you know, in the Middle East, and I was in this town, as you can see. Yeah, it has this tower, very nice tower. And you can see the name
yeah,
of the city.
Burj Khalifa,
That's
right?
right. So, exactly. So this is my son's. I gave it. I brought it as a little gift for him. So
Make sure he doesn't poke his eye with
it used to be called Burj Dubai, but when Dubai had financial problems, they had to rename it to the Khalifa, ruler of Abu Dhabi, who
Yeah,
bailed them out for that. Um, so I was visiting and I was watching all these people, expats, who were wearing very interesting day dates, all gold. And I said, the young people, 35, 40, around your age, roaming around with ties, feeling important. And I said, I always thought I should I shouldn't wear one because it's ostentatious. What am I demonstrating? That I'm also wealthy, important, and all that. So I said to myself, but I always wanted a yellow one. That's the honest truth. And I'm even contemplating. I don't have the money, but I'm contemplating that if I have something, a milestone in my life, I should get one, a day date. But all I'm saying, it's because of you. It's because of the individual. It's what you guys want to do
right.
it. It doesn't really matter. The investment thing, yeah, there are certain watches that will always be investment grade, um, and they will appreciate in time. That's fine. But for people like myself, do I get I don't know, this versus the other in the price range of the 10 to 30,000 dollars, which is what I can, theoretically try and pay
Yeah.
theoretically. It's not a big deal.
Well, for
It
me,
doesn't really matter.
ultimately, I do like the way that watches make up a certain element of man's style. It's basically the most commonplace and universally acceptable form of jewelry that a man can wear. And I know newer generations have other standards, but this is just the limits of my own taste and my own outlook. But more importantly, for me, watches have always been about the stories that they are able to tell and the kind of story that they enable you to tell about yourself. So that's just another way of saying what you just described in detail. It is about how it makes you feel. At the end of the day, if someone else thinks that watch is too small for you, too large for your wrist, too bulky, too gaudy, too thin, too whatever, it doesn't matter. It's about making a knowledgeable and conscious choice that satisfies you, that you can defend against yourself, and that you can explain to others you love and care for. If you can do that, doesn't matter how cheap your watch is, how expensive your watch is, whether it breaks your back or your bank, it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether the general public likes it, whether there's a hype around it, as long as it's on your wrist, as long as it makes you feel the best version of yourself. I think you're on the right path. The brands, the name, the model, the make, all of that comes, the style, all of that comes much later. The reason I brought up Federer is, because I wanted to end our conversation on a point that's on a lighter note, so to speak. I was gonna talk about two related figures while we are talking about how the industry is gonna cope. What is Rolex going to do without having Roger as the apotheosis of the brand?
Wow, you're
What's
using
next for
very,
Rolex?
very immaculate Greek words. My
I'm
goodness.
trying to be the most Hellenic Jew I can be for
What's
the new year.
Hellenic Jew? Well, there are a few, by the way. There
Of
is a
course.
small community in Greece.
Well, regrettably, why it's small, of course, and
Of course.
smaller than what it was.
Yes, yes.
But
Of course.
you know that, I mean, that's how a lot of Jews lived under the empire as Hellenized Jews. So that's a long story. That's a long history. But
Yeah.
yes, what does Rolex do without Roger Federer
Federer.
as the apotheosis of the brand?
It's a difficult question because all I can say is that they have been looking at getting the next tennis player. And that next tennis player is a difficult figure. He is not the apotheosis of tennis. His statements are very political and at times foolish. And Rolex doesn't, although he wears a Rolex, a Daytona white face, and I have seen pictures of him with other Rolexes, he's not the quality of Federer in terms of the standing he has. He's a younger fellow. I'm sure by now you know who
Tsitsipas,
he.
right?
Yes, yes. Um, he could be one, but his mouth is really uncontrollable. And
I
it's
think
like the other Greek in Australia, by the way. I don't know if you follow
I
tennis, but
like
I
him.
think he's
I like him better. I like him better, actually. I don't
curious.
know how you feel about this. Yeah.
I love this guy. He's a basketball player who turned tennis into a new sport.
Yeah, Kyrgios is actually, as a character, especially, he's
Yeah.
my favorite. I do like his playing style too, but it's just that sort of uh, energy he brings to the field. It's very unique. I find him like maybe like an Andre Agassi for our age.
Hmm.
Um, but Tsitsipas, I think, sometimes they say this about actors, El Profesor, and I always thought it was kind of funny, but I get what they mean. When they say he's too handsome, he's too pretty. I think there's something to be said about that. I think Tsitsipas suffers from that. I think he's too pretty to be an aspirational figure. He's too unrealistically handsome, I think, for someone to represent something. Federer
Yeah.
is a good looking guy, but he's also good looking in a more normal way.
Yeah, and also he's Swiss. It's one of the
Right.
few times that they have promoted a Swiss person. They will have to find somebody in tennis because that's their big thing.
Why is that?
Football is not their big thing. Why is
I
that?
mean, look, I know it has something to do with the status. I know it has something to do with the fact that it's an individual sport. But why this obsession with tennis? Do you think that has something to do with Roger, or because he was this Swiss um, athlete who was basically at the top of the sport, or has tennis always been so important to
Yeah,
Rolex?
I think it's the latter. I think it has been very important for the brand from the 70s. It has always been there. So it's tennis, sailing, music, film. These are the things also the foundation supports over time, in the industry, the environment, diving, type of thing, the James Cameron, all that stuff.
Mhm.
Football is something they don't want to support. Football is more of a popular sport. Traditionally, tennis has always been an upper middle class sport, um, and something Rolex has associated itself for 40 years. Wimbledon, uh, the Roland Garros, and all of that. Yes, F1 and golf. Yes, for sure. Golf, of course, for many, many years, and F1 also for many years. Part of these ethos, Daytona, motorsports, and whatnot. Football has never been the case. Football is the domain of Tudor, and this is where what's his name comes in. Boris, what's his name? Beckham. Yeah.
Beckham. Yeah. Where did Boris come from? So now my second question, and this is more tongue in cheek, but I also wanna hear your opinion, because now you're in the UK, right?
Of course.
So there's a new sheriff in town. Apparently, there's a new sovereign, and he's wearing one of your favorite brands and one of mine as well, Parmigiani Fleurier. Do you think he should get a special coronation watch? And if so, what should it be? I was just posting a poll in the chat. I put Parmigiani, I put Gégé Le Coultre, and I put other. So these will be our three options. Let's see how the community reacts to it. But please tell me what you think. Should he get a coronation watch, and what should it be?
I think they should give it to him. They should gift it. Parmigiani should do one. I don't know if he will request it, but he has been wearing this watch for many, many years. I remember him now for maybe 10, 12 years. It's not just a recent thing. Not that I hang out with the king, do not think that, but just relate with the pictures and all that. So maybe Parmigiani should do a special one, but I'm sure Parmigiani will use it to say, oh, the kings have worn it and princes and all of that. And here's our watch, the king's watch. No, they should. It's a beautiful watch. I mean, it's a work of art. Parmigiani, the older Parmigianis are, I think, more beautiful than the newer Parmigianis. But again, it's my own. It's a wonderful watch.
This is a model they have. They no longer actually have in their usual lineup. I made a video on this, actually inspired basically by two watches that to me seem to define not only his taste in watches, but also his approach to luxury goods that are grounded on values of utility, reliability, and long-lasting value. And this chronograph that was issued to him by either the Royal Air Forces or the Navy, it was a Hamilton, great piece, Fab 4, 6BB, beautiful little thing, hand wound, of course, in its original version. Still plenty of great ones to be found on the secondary market that are actual mil-spec watches and that are relatively affordable. Hamilton itself makes a modern version under their, I think they call it, off the top of my mind, I can't say, but that's, I think it's like their Aviation Pioneer Mechanical Chrono or something. So they have it in modern form as well, which is, the movement is a little updated. So that might be something that people prefer. I like, the older the better. I like vintage stuff. I like stuff with a little bit of wear, and King Charles has been an example of that in public. But yeah, this is here's close-up shots of the watch. You know, the double-stepped case with fluting all around, the beautiful guilloche decoration on the dial, those heat-blued hand fixtures. You know, that's date window right between 1 and 2, the Roman numerals. I mean, it's in many ways a very nice dressy version of his youthful military issued chronograph. You see how that double step is replicated on the case back as well. It's just a very balanced, beautiful design.
How much does it retail? It used to.
It doesn't retail anymore, but it's around, you know, $15,000 to $20,000. Of course, it's precious metal. I saw a white gold version of it, which is a little sportier with Arabic numerals rather than Roman numerals on the dial, recently on Chrono 24. And I think it was around $15,000, $16,000.
Wow.
So it's like it's basically a luxurious rendition of an automatic chronograph, because it also runs on a modified version of Zenit El Primero caliber. So you see the 400
as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he should get a Zenith.
Perhaps. Of course, like, you know, that same guilloche work is replicated on that gold rotor for the movement as well, as you can see here. It's a pretty nice piece. I mean, this was that white gold sportier version of it that I saw on Chrono 24 recently. It has like these fatter alpha hands as well. I like his one better, honestly. I guess I'm getting old. I like the dressier, you know, louder versions of the watches a little better, but I think they're both exquisite. No offense for the Tonda GT. You know, they have their new line of chronographs. Let me quickly go to their website to show it off. Like the chronograph version of this design, that you have some choice words for because of the bezel and its decoration. But I think in certain forms,
I don't like it.
It's quite beautiful. I mean, it's very sporty. I love the big date. I love the fact that it's also an annual calendar. I like the option of the rubber band. But I think the older toric chronograph is a superior design, is a more original design, is a more elegant design.
Do you like the Apple Ultra?
The Apple Watch?
Yeah.
No, I don't do Apple Watches, Professor. What do you think about them?
My kids told me, Dad, you should get a big watch so you can see it. And secondly, get an Apple Ultra watch. I said, okay, that's big watch. They said, yeah, it's much cheaper than all these watches you're looking at. It's only $800. It only, and probably the cost of making it is, you know, $50, but it's only $800. And it tells you all these things, you know. It also acts as a phone. So, Dad, why do you have to do all these expensive watches? You know, just buy a Apple Watch. And this is for you, the new generation.
Well, you know, people attribute this to the infinitely quotable Oscar Wilde, but I think he has once said, you know, I'm not rich enough to buy cheap things, so I will I'll shy away from an Apple Watch.
I'm not rich enough to buy cheap things. Yes.
Yeah. Look, I mean, for me, again, I'm not a purist. I'm not a Luddite. I do have a, you know, smartphone in my life because I'm myself very stupid. So I need this as an implement to keep me at an average level of room temperature IQ. But you know, I don't like the fact that they are so disposable, that they are so expendable, that you have to completely surrender yourself to this game of upgrading every year, if not every other year, right? You know, I don't change phones for 4 or 5 years, but by the fifth year, they start sticking to my ear, basically. I don't know what they're doing with it, with those software updates, but they start heating up like to insane levels, and just like, you know, acting up in strange ways when they get too old. So I don't like that protocol of industrial production that has by now become universal, you know, where things are made basically to become obsolete within a cycle of 1 or 2 years. And it is a well-worn principle of industrial production, right? Planned obsolescence. It was there from the very beginning, but I think it has gotten to this level where I don't want to keep up. You know, my favorite watch, again, just like my friend Fries there in the chat, my Belgian friend Fries with Mayo, it's a 55-year-old watch, and it doesn't need an update. It doesn't need an upgrade. It barely it barely needs service. No one has touched that watch in any way for the last decade. So Apple Watch is just, as a principle, it's not for me. I don't have any strong positions about other people wearing it, but it's basically the opposite of what I value in terms of a timepiece.
Yeah.
All right. So we have come to the end of this broadcast. We have been here with you for an hour and a half. The professor will be with me next week, probably around the same time, but if his schedule allows, of course, we'll set it up, and we will be most probably talking about the industry responses to the crisis in terms of the networks of distribution, in terms of perhaps certain ways of marketing and selling their own models, and in terms of even design and production. So we'll talk about all of that next week. Hit the like button if you can on your way out. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm here at least every day with some watch-related content. In either case, the best way to support the channel is to spread the word, is to share the link. There is a lot of content that I've made over the last few months that you can share with your friends. And that is a great way to attract people into the channel, and a great way to help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can get some return for the effort and work I put in here. Of course, with the great help of people like El Profesor, who is so generous with his time and knowledge. And also, you know, if you want to support the channel before it actually gets monetized, you have a number of options, and you know where they are. It is in the crawling ticker. It is in the video description. And I've just posted the links for the PayPal, Cash App, And if you want to become a consistent contributor for the increased quality and quantity of content on this channel, you can always sign up on Patreon as well. Any last words, Professor?
No, I think we're good. We're good. I agree with planned obsolescence. We have seen this in all industrial products, consumer goods, white and gray goods for many years. I think this is well said. I think the watch industry in general will be okay from what we're seeing now. It will not disappear. Countries don't disappear. Watch companies will not disappear. What will disappear is the frenziness of what we've seen over the last 3-4 years. Certainly, will go back to pre-COVID days, and they will appreciate, but over time, much gradually, much slowly than the 10 and 20% that we've seen every month or every 2 months in some of these models during the hype. Having said that, I will continue to believe that you should buy a watch because you like it and you enjoy it, and forget this business of it's an investment and it's a store of value and what they have you believe. If you do want to get something as an investment, go and buy yourself a gold bar. Hold on to it, because in my opinion, gold prices will go up. Just get, an ounce or a few ounces, or if you prefer more. If you believe that inflation will be with us and gold will appreciate, go buy assets of that kind. Gold coins, gold bars, silver, whatever your cup of tea is when it comes to precious metals. But don't buy a watch because, this thing is going to go up. I'll sell it at a certain price. We've discussed it in the past. There is a myth about the store of value in a watch, which has crept into people's psyche over the last few years, that they're buying an investable good and it will be sold. It will never be sold at the price you bought it. It will always be sold less that, unless it's one of the few coveted watches, which we don't need to repeat again. And
of course,
but buy it because of the aesthetic pleasure it brings you, whether it is a gold or a silver or any brand. We're here because of the appreciation of the watch,
and
of the watch.
always also buy it responsibly. Buy it with your disposable income, without putting yourself at any sort of risk. Again, this is not an investment. This is not going to save your family for 7 generations to come. For the most part, you're lucky enough if you get a decade or a few decades of enjoyment from a nice watch that will keep the time of your life for you, that will give you a few great memories, that will intensify a few personal and intimate moments. You can hardly ask more from any commodity. I mean, this is something that you can wear on your wrist and go through life with. There are not many precious things that we can invest in terms of our emotions and carry so intimately.
And you bring up an important point, because I'm also of the same philosophy in life about the Apple Watch versus watches. I want to wear a watch that I know it's alive, it's living, based on my movement, and there is something in it that is vibrant because a watch is alive, like humans are. Um, I like to have that feeling that it's alive in that sense, as I am alive. I hate, in some ways, the smartwatches because, first of all, it doesn't keep you offline; it keeps you online forever. So you
That
get a call while you're sleeping, you get a call. Of course, you might say snooze, but you get a message, you need to look at the message. You're all the time switched on in this paranoia of the world we live in, that we all have to be responding messages in 2 seconds, in 1 second. There is WhatsApp, there is Signal, there is Telegram, there is Viber, there is, Botem, there is all kinds of apps that gets us disturbed all the time, plus the emails, you know. So the watch is that. Secondly, what I don't like about the smartwatch is that this sense of monitoring. Apple is monitoring me. Somebody is listening to me all the time. Not that they're not doing it with my phone. I'm sure they are, as we're speaking now. But just the sense that there is no privacy whatsoever. And the only thing I have left is a mechanical watch that is attached to me, and it's alive, it's living, it's based on my mood. And I think that's the great thing about a mechanical watch. And to me, my children might never get the feeling of wearing these watches. And before I die, I give it to people who appreciate them, or I will never sell them unless I'm in desperate need. But I don't think we buy them to give them. This Patek Philippe thing, you hold it for the next generation, is as good as thinking that we're going to live forever. You're just buying it, and we're buying it for our satisfaction. And
right.
if the kids end up buying it, I mean, getting them from us, fine. If not, that's it. We enjoy what we have.
Very well said, Professor. Perfectly put. And it's a great point to end our conversation with today. I'll be with you again at 8 p.m. Again, it's today already. It's Saturday. So 8 p.m. October, 1st of October, Pacific Daylight Savings Time still. I'll be here in Los Angeles, and maybe the professor will join us for a little bit when he's risen up in the morning. And until then, we say goodbye. Thank you, Professor, and thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon.